Hey everybody, today I am deep into Indianapolis, relatively close to downtown, only about a mile and a half or so. In fact, I can see the top of some of the buildings from downtown just looking back up there to the north, and you could call it an up-and-coming neighborhood, but it's been up and coming for quite a few years now. I'm in Fountain Square, so we're gonna get into what it's like here in Fountain Square, what some of the homes are like here in Fountain Square, what you can find in Fountain Square, and why it is an up-and-coming neighborhood and why it's been that way for quite a few years now, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If you want to know everything is to know about places like Fountain Square, popular neighborhood in Indianapolis, or any Indianapolis neighborhood for that matter, any place outside of Indianapolis as well, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video. Now we have people reaching out to us from all over the country who are moving here, and they want to know, of course, what's going to be the best fit for them. What neighborhood, what city, may not necessarily even be Indianapolis. It could be one of the cities that surround Indianapolis. There's a lot of variety and a lot of different fits. So if you're wondering what's best for you, then reach out to us any way that you know how. We're always happy to answer those questions for you and how something might be the best fit for you. And we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to Indianapolis. So I am in well, it's really kind of famous Fountain Square, at least right behind me. I'm on a street here, residential street, and you can see some of the homes behind me as I'm walking up here to the north. But Fountain Square is a place that used to be, years and years and years ago, it still is a commercial district, but it's Indianapolis's oldest commercial district, but it used to be filled with restaurants and especially theaters. There were about 7, I think, theaters here in this particular neighborhood back in the early 1900s. And it thrived for a really long time. It was a place to go, a place for entertainment if you lived in Indianapolis. Of course, Indianapolis wasn't nearly as big then as it is now, but as Indianapolis grew, just like a lot of big cities, as they grow, there are some growing pains. And when you had the introduction of the interstate system, the federal interstate system, the United States, and I-65 made its way through Indianapolis from the south to the north, that was generally pretty good for Indianapolis, except for neighborhoods like this. When I-65 cut through kind of the downtown area, very close to the downtown area of Indianapolis, it cut Fountain Square off from Indianapolis. So I mean, it is a literal physical border between downtown and Fountain Square. Even though Fountain Square is only a mile and a half or so from here, it cut it off in a way that made it really difficult to access. You really couldn't get to downtown Indianapolis all that easily. In fact, if you look at the neighborhood just to the west of here, and in fact the western border of Fountain Square is I-65, and when you get up to the northern border, in fact when you get to the western border of Fountain Square, I-65, to get into the neighboring neighborhood on the other side of it, which is actually kind of an up-and-coming neighborhood right now as well. It's Bates Hendricks, although it's got a long way to go, a lot longer way to go than what Fountain Square has. It's hard to get to it. I mean, there's only a couple of ways you can get into Bates Hendricks across I-65. So, I mean, it's literally like a moat separating these two. So it's not surprising that I-65, once it cut off this particular part of Indianapolis, that it hurt it. You know, when you've got that direct access cut off, I mean, there's really no positive spin, honestly, you could put on that. So it did hurt it. It's only a mile and a half. Now there's the Cultural Trail, which runs right here through Fountain Square. It's actually one of the cultural districts in Indianapolis, along with a bunch of others that are fairly nearby. My wife actually, she used to live in one of the cultural districts along Mass Ave, and when she lived there, this was years and years and years ago. It was before I was even in real estate, and truthfully before I really knew all that much about Indianapolis. Even though I had lived in this city for a really long time before we met, I didn't explore every single part of it and get to know every part of it. And I knew a little bit about Fountain Square, but we would get Thai takeout at a place called Siam Square, which is just up Virginia Street here. So I or she or both of us would drive from her condo along Mass Ave right there to Siam Square. And at the time, I never really knew that I was going into Fountain Square in the actual neighborhood. It was fairly easy from her place to get here. You didn't have to worry about I-65 and I-70 all that much because you could cross under all that very, very easily. But by car, you dipped in here, and I always thought, wow, this is a pretty neat, retro, kind of funky neighborhood. Now, this was years and years ago, and since then, it has exploded, really, to kind of match what it was probably, at least a lot closer of a match to what it was like back in the early 1900s as a commercial district, a commercial hub, but also an arts hub, and also a place that people want to gather just for bars and restaurants and really funky shops and like a comic book shop, places like that. In this particular area, it's known, this isn't an offensive thing, but it's known kind of as being a hipster neighborhood. Honestly, even though you've got people who are single living here, you've got married people here, you have people even with kids that live in Fountain Square, although it may not be the perfect family neighborhood. You would have to like this particular kind of lifestyle, which is very dense urban living close to downtown Indianapolis. But you've got plenty of options for places to eat, places to go, things to see, even theaters, lots of live music right here in Fountain Square. A couple different venues for live music that I've been to a number of times over the years. And in fact, some of those times, many years ago, came in here, thought the same thing, that this is a really cool place, this Fountain Square. I just don't know that much about it. Since then, have learned a lot more about it and know that if I had everything to do over and let's say move into Indianapolis and wanted this kind of lifestyle, there are a few places that I, in my head, would pick as the sort of the short list to choose from. And Fountain Square would be on it. And it would be on it because it is just a place that has a lot of life. So you can get back onto some of these residential streets, and of course it gets a lot more quiet than what it is where I'm standing right now with some cars going by. And you've got Upland Brewery right behind me. You've got another cafe and bar just right across the street from me here, and Revolution Restaurant over there as well. I'm gonna walk this way towards the Thunderbird, and you can see a little bit more of the commercial aspect to Fountain Square. But even though it has all of this commercial part, it still has a pretty big residential part as well. So speaking of that residential, because it's up and coming, anytime you say that phrase, up and coming, well, that must mean a couple of different things. That must mean it's pretty rough, or at least it was rough for a long time, and that's absolutely true. So 20, 30 years ago, and longer ago in the past than that, the decline happened here, and a lot of the homes that were in really good shape went into decline as well and completely neglected. So you can go through Fountain Square and find extremely rough homes. Extremely rough. So rough that they need to be torn down. You got to start over and with a clean slate. And so you'll go from one street to the next, and you're going to see a lot of homes like that. And right next door, you're going to see one of the most contemporary, coolest looking, although design-wise not for everybody, type home right here in this particular area. So it is littered with homes like that. Ultra contemporary, ultra modern, very cool looking home that of course is very different from a lot of the homes that are original in here. I mean, they really stand out when you look at some of the more original homes, turn of the century homes in this particular area. It doesn't really match the architecture that you're used to seeing in a place like this at all, but it's kind of the trend in a place like this. Now, up here on Virginia, and you can see the fountains there behind me, even though they're not going right now, but it's where Fountain Square gets its name from. So those homes are littered all over the place, and of course, given that it's up and coming, it's very popular, they carry a price tag as well. So you could have a home built in here, could have a home that has just been built, purchased, and it's gonna cost you $400, $500, $600, even over $700,000 for those things. So me, in my mind, I would consider a place like Fountain Square now at this point because it's up and coming, and it's been up and coming long enough to where I would say, yeah, at this point, it's probably well on its way. It's a place that's gonna be desirable for a long period of time. It has enough businesses here, enough places to go, enough entertainment to make it a destination, not just for you living here in Indianapolis, but for people that live outside of this neighborhood. In fact, when I used to come down here for concerts years ago, I haven't been to one in quite some time, with 3 young kids and having to sleep a little bit more. I don't go to concerts all that much because some of those concerts here, and we are out pretty late. So you could hit a bar in this area, go to the concert, and before you know it, it's 3 in the morning. It's also duck pin bowling, this area. Remember doing that years and years ago as well, and thinking this was a cool neighborhood. But it's up and coming enough to where I feel like it's probably gonna be desirable for a very long time. And now businesses are moving into this area and kind of taking advantage of the fact that a lot of people want to be here, want to live here, and of course also visit here too. Fountain Square has a lot happening. Now, if this isn't exactly the place for you, you feel like maybe it's a little bit too happening, and even being off in some of the residential areas, it's maybe a little bit too noisy. Some of the surrounding neighborhoods could be more of your thing, although Fountain Square is, like I said, probably a little bit better on the up and coming, a little further along than some of those surrounding areas are. In fact, I can see oftentimes listings that pop on the market and they'll say they're Fountain Square. I'm walking east right now and they're so far east. Generally the eastern border of Fountain Square is kind of in the Keystone Avenue range, and it'll be right there along Keystone, or maybe just east of it, and it'll say in popular Fountain Square, and that is a stretch. So this isn't your thing and you think I want to be relatively close to it but live on the outskirts of it a little bit more. There are some sketchy places around Fountain Square, especially off to the east, and even when you get maybe a little bit south of here as well, to where it can be pretty rough and probably not something that is gonna be on the up and coming for quite some time. So you have to be careful in an area like this. But for the most part, when you stay fairly tight to where I'm standing right now or walking right now, close to the central portion of Fountain Square, this is where it's happening. And so all of the neighborhoods surrounding here are those places where that up and coming is taking place. So if you have any questions about a place like Fountain Square or any of the nearby neighborhoods at all, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.